Okay. Om. Om. Om.
Om Sahana Bhavatu
Om Sahana Bhavatu
Sahanau Bhunaktu
Sahanau Bhunattu
Saha Viryam Karvavahai
Saha Viryam Karvavahai
Tejasvinavaditamastu
Tejasvati Tejasvinavadidhamastu
Ma Vidvishavahai.
Ma Vidvishavahai.
Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi.
Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi.
Om Sadashiva Samarambham
Om Sadashiva Samarambam
Shankaracharya Madhyamam
Shankaracharya Madhyamam
Asmad Acharya Paryantam
Asmat Acharya Paryantam
Vande Guru Paramparam.
Vande Guru Paramparam.
Om Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu
Om Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu
Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha
Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha
Guru Sakshat Paran Brahma
Guru Sakshat Param Brahma
Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha.
Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha.
Om Saraswati Namastubhyam
Om Saraswati Namastubhyam
Varde Kama Rupini
Varde Kamarupini
Vidyarambham Karishyami
Vidyarambam Karishyami
Siddhir Bhavatu Me Sada.
Siddhir Bhavatu Me Sada.
Om Karpanya Dosho Pahata Subhavaha
Om Karpanya Dosho Bhada Swabhavaha
Prichhami Tvam Dharma Sammudchetaha
Prachami Tvam Dharma Sammoda Chetaha
Yashreyasyan Nishchitam Bruhi Tanme
Yachrayasya Nishtitam Bruhi Tanme
Shishyaste Hamshadi Mam Tvam Prapannam.
Shishyaste Ham Shadimam Tvam Prapannam.
Om Vangme Manasi Pratishtita
Om Vangme Manasi Pratishtita
Manome Vachi Pratishtitam
Manome Vachi Pratishtitam
Avir Avir Maedhi
Avir Avirma Edi
Vedasya Ma'anistaha
Vetasya Ma Anistaha
Shrutam Me Ma Prahasihi
Shrutam Nema Prahasihi
Anena Adhitena
Anena Aditena
Ahoratran Sandadami
Ahoratran Sandadami
Ritam Vadishyami
Ritam Vadishyami
Satyam Vadishyami
Satyam Vadishyami
Tanmamavatu
Tanmam Avatu
Tadvaktaram Avatu
Tat Bhaktaram Avatu
Avatu Mam Avatu Vaktaram
Avatu Mam Avatu Bhaktaram
Avatu Vaktaram.
Avatu Bhaktaram.
Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Om Bhadram Karne Bishrunyama Devaha
Om Bhadram Karne Vishuna Yamadevaha
Bhadram Pashyema Akshabhirya Jatraha
Bhadram Pashyem Ashabhirat
Akshabhirya Akshabhirya
Akshabhirat Ajatraha Jatraha
Stirera Ange
Strera Ange
Tushtuvagvam
Suštuvagvam
Swastanubihi
Swastinubihi
Vyashema Deva Hitam Yadayuhu
Nashema Devathitam Yadayuhu
Swastina Indro Vridashravaha
Swastina Indro Vidasharavaha
Swastina Pusha Vishwavedaha
स्वस्ति न पूषा विश्ववेदः
स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः
स्वस्ति न ताक्षो अरिष्टनेमिः
स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु
स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्ददातु।
ओम शांति शांति शांतिः।
ओम शांति शांति शांतिः।
ओम अहं वृक्षस्य रेरिव
ओम अहं वृक्षस्य रेरिव
कीर्तिपृष्ठं गिरेरिव
कीर्तिपृष्ठं गिरेरिव
ऊर्ध्वो पवित्रो वाजिनीव
ऊर्ध्वो पवित्रो वाजिनीव
स्वमृतम् अस्मि
स्वमृतम् अस्मि
द्रविणं gwam
द्रविणं वां
सवर्चसं
सवर्चसं
सुमेधा अमृतोक्षितः
सुमेधा अमृतोक्षितः
इति त्रिशङ्कोर्वेदानुवचनम्।
इति त्रिशङ्कोर्वेदानुवचनम्।
ओम शांति शांति शांतिः।
ओम शांति शांति शांतिः।
Thank you, Kay. I thought you
Okay.
followed very well, and I think I can see that you've prepared some of the tough words. So, yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Excellent. Should we do the
Chanting? I can do it.
Okay, perfect, perfect.
But you know, I have to tell you, I was prepared last week. I thought that I signed up for last week, but today I didn't read anything at all. So I'm going to try. Okay.
It's okay. You're not reading it. Krishna is reading it through you. Everything will come back. Don't worry.
I think first, first so many shlokas I would be okay. The last few, not quite sure. I'm going to try it. Okay.
No worries at all.
Arjuna uvacha jayasi chet karmanaste matha buddhir janardana tatkim karmani gore mam niyojayasi keshava vyamishreneva vakyena buddhim mohayasiva me tathegam vada nishchitya yena shreyo hyamapnuyam. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Lokesmin Tvivida Nishta Pura Brokta Mayanaga Jnana Yogena Sankhyanam Karma Yogena Yoginam Nakarmanam Anarambat Naishkaryam Purushoshnude Nacha Sanyasya Nadeva Siddhim Samadhi Gakshati Nahi Kaschit Shranamabi Jadu Tishtatya Karma Kriti Karyate Hyavasah Karma Arva Prakriti Jayargunaihi Karmendriyani Samyamya Yayakre Manasasmaran Indriyarthan Vimudhatma Mityachara Sauchyate Yaspindriyani Manasa Niyamyaravatirjuna Karmendriyai Karma Yogam Asaktassa Vishishyate Niyatam Kuru Karmatvam Karmajayo Hya Karmanaha Sharira Yatra Pichate Na Prashidhyeta Karmanaha Yajñartat Karmano Nyatra Lokoyam Karma Bantanaha Tadartham Karma Kaunteya Muktas Sangas Samachara Saha Yajñah Praja Srishtva Puro Vacha Praja Pratihi Anena Pratavishyatvam Eva Sho Svishta Kamatih Devan Pavayan Danena Te Deva Pavayantu Vaha Parasparam Bhavayantaha श्रेयः परमवाप्स्यत इष्टान् भोगान् हि वो देवाः दास्यन्ते यज्ञभाविताः तैर्दत्तान् प्रदायैभ्यः यो पुङ्क्तेस्तेन एव च यज्ञशिष्टासिनः सन्तः मुच्यन्ते सर्वकिल्बिषैः पुण्यते तेऽत्कवं भावाः ये पचन्त्यात्मकारणात् अन्नात् भवन्ति भूतानि पर्जन्यात् सम्भवः यज्ञात् भवति पर्जन्यः यज्ञः कर्म समुद्भवः कर्म ब्रह्मोद्भवं विद्धि ब्रह्मासुरसमुद्भवं तस्मात् सर्वगतं ब्रह्मा नित्यं यज्ञे प्रतिष्ठितम् एवं प्रवर्तितं चक्रं नानुवर्तयति अघायुरिन्द्रिया रामः मोघं पार्थ स जीवति यस्त्वात् यस्त्वात् आत्मतृप्तश्च मानवः आत्मनेव च सन्तुष्टः तस्य कार्यं न विद्यते नैव तस्य कृतेनार्थः नाकृतेनेह कश्चन न चास्य सर्वभूतेषु कश्चित् तत्तव्यपाश्रयः तस्मादसक्तः सततं कार्यं कर्म समाचर असक्तो हि आचरन् कर्म परमनाप्नोति पुरुषः कर्मणैव हि संसिद्धिम् आस्थिता जनकातयः लोकसङ्ग्रहमेवापि सम्पश्यन् कर्तुमर्हसि यद्यथाचरति श्रेष्ठः तत्तदेवेतरो जनः स यत् प्रमाणं कुरुते लोकस्तदनुवर्तते न मे पार्थास्थितकर्तव्यं त्रिषु लोकेषु किञ्चनः नानवाप्तमवाप्तव्यं वर्त एव च कर्मणि यदि हि अहं न वर्तेय जातु कर्मण्यतन्त्रितः मम वार्तन्ते मनुष्याः पार्थ सर्वचः. I think this is the last one, right?
Very well read, yeah.
Are
you reading from the Tamil?
Yes.
That's your secret. All you
This book.
Very good practice and very good pronunciation.
Okay, so we'll start. We're on shloka 40, 41, 42, right? So the last of the chapter, and we've already basically now we're just like going to pull together everything that we have read in chapter 4, and we'll go ahead with that, where we're trying to understand how do we go towards the self-perception, right? So we've understood the various forms of yajna. We've understood why yajna is extremely important, why tap is important, the austerities, and now we've seen what are the prerequisites of self-perception in the last class, and the three prerequisites are that one, that there has to be a conviction in the path that we are following. So, which essentially means that you don't waver. Once you've started on a path, you have to continue on this for a while. Otherwise, what happens is you start with one, like, for example, there's a disease that we are afflicted with, and we start with one type of medicinal path. And then after 2 days, we decide, no, this is not working. Let me jump to the other one. Let me jump to the other one. When we do that, we actually harm ourselves, right? So once we start a path of, a path that we need to work towards, we need to focus on that with full conviction. So you can't keep focusing on it unless you have that firm conviction that this works and this is good for me. Because inevitably we will be beset with problems, issues, questions. And at that time, the only thing that will keep us on that path is a firm conviction that this works. It has worked for others before, it will work for me. I just need to keep doing what needs to be done, right? Second thing is constancy. Very, very important. Constancy is more important than the consistency with which we do something is very important to develop the right habit, and also to make sure that we remember the principles on a daily basis. If we don't do that, then even the most elevated souls, we have found that they have fallen through, because the world is really strong. The world is very glamorous. It's like being in a very high current or a strong current river without anything to hold on to. We are going to get blown away. There's no way that we can. The only way to stand is to hold on to something that will keep us from getting, drifted away with that strong current of water. That's why constancy in the path, in the discipline, is very important. And the last one is self-control. Now, if we don't have self-control, then there is no way that we can continue on a particular path, right? So that self-control also comes from a word dhriti in Hindi, dhriti, right? So dhriti is something that we talk about when we also wish the birthday wishes in our group. We always call for satviki dhriti. So not just satviki intellect, not just your intelligence. Intelligence will tell us this is the right thing, this is not the right thing. But the ability to continue to do what is the right thing is the dhriti. So that comes from self-control, control over our senses, over our mind. We say a lot this time that we have to control our mind, but I would say that's actually a wrong way to put it. We don't control our mind, we direct our mind.
Redirect.
Our mind is very, very strong. It is the strongest and the most amazing tool we have with us, and that's the only way. Intellect will never help us appreciate who Lord is. You cannot recognize the Lord through intellect. You can only recognize and experience him through your mind. It's the most amazing tool we have. The only thing we need to do with our intellect is to direct it towards the right path, so that it utilizes its energies, harnesses its potential in the right way, right? So self-control over our senses is extremely important. If we have these three things in place, self-control, constancy, and firm conviction, then the progress on our path is inevitable. There is no way that someone who does these three things, has these three things in place, and continues on this path will not achieve self-realization. It doesn't matter where you have come from, how you have come onto this path, what your past has been, what we have done in our past, how many sins we may have accrued. It doesn't matter at all. It has been very clearly clarified in the past shlokas, where there was an example of Valmiki also given, right? Where it doesn't matter what you've done and how you may be the greatest of the sinners. If you have these three characteristics and you are firm on this path, you will achieve self-realization, right? So with that, let's start. Let's start the shloka 40.
Yeah.
Nandini, will you read with us?
Yeah, you can read the connection of Shlok 39.
39 or 40?
After 39, before 40. The
40,
connection
yeah.
39 and 40.
The harm occurring from a lack of these qualities is indicated below by the Lord.
So actually, before we read the Sanskrit part, I wanted to connect this to the previous shloka as well. So Gita, it's a very it's a book that doesn't tell you what to do. It only tells you if you do this will be the consequence, and if you behave a different way, then this will be the consequence. Now it's you choose. At no point is it forcing you or telling you you should be exactly this way. And because Krishna Bhagwan Ji is speaking with that mindset, he is reinforcing a few things about us being in this body form. One, it is always our choice. It is always going to be our choice who we choose to be. It is not us giving up our power and our intellect and our faculties to choose. But we read the Gita with so much earnestness is because it sharpens all of these qualities for us to make better choices. Choices that help us in our udhar, our own self-realization. So which is why the context of the shloka 40 is interesting, because right now 39, he said, these are the characteristics you should have. And if you practice these characteristics, self-realization is a guarantee. And he's at shloka 40, he will say a person who is ignorant will have XYZ characteristics and they will suffer ABC consequence. So he will say, if you don't practice these characteristics and if you choose to remain ignorant, this will be your life. You will go through a lot of suffering because you will constantly look for happiness outside. Right? So sometimes people wonder why there's a breaking of the flow, but the breaking of the flow is only reinforcing the importance we have to make the right choices. And Bhagwan Ji is not telling Arjun what to do ever. He's making Arjun choose. So even the end of the Gita, at the very last shloka, Arjun eventually says, I remember who I am and I choose to be that person. Right? And that's our journey. Please, now I think.
Yeah, and I think what he's saying is very important, and also to understand why it is this way. Why is Bhagwanji knows all the things, right? So why is Bhagwanji not being prescriptive? Why is he not telling Arjun what to do? Why is he telling him all the things that he shouldn't do? Or why is he laying out these consequences and everything in so great a detail? Why has he expended 700 shlokas? He could have told him, in a very prescriptive manner in 20 shlokas, this is who you should be. The reason is that he has made us in his own image. We are created in his own image. So he will make us do how he behaves. We are gods if we can realize that divinity, right? So he does not he has free choice, right? He has free will. And that free will is very dear to him. It is part of his innate nature. So he cannot take away free will from us either, because we are made in his image. So we are him. So we have that innate nature of free will, and he will not take it away from us. And that is very important for us to remember in our dealings with others as well, whether they are our children or whether they are others. Half the time things start to go wrong because we, in our relationships, because we try and control. We try and be prescriptive. We try and tell our children what they should or should not do. And then we try to control it, and we get upset when they don't do what we tell them to do. Similarly, we try and control, when we grow a bit older, we try and control our parents also. I'm telling you, this is the right thing to do. We control our team members. We try and control our, we basically try and control everything around. Right? And that sense of control is there. And that is what creates the problem, because it is not in line with our innate nature. It is not in line with universal principles. Universal principle is free will. We must exercise free will, not give up our free will to the concept of destiny when it is wrongly understood. We give up our free will saying, this is destiny. I am destined for this. That is the wrongest way to understand destiny as we have understood through Gita, right? We have to exercise our free will. The moment we do not exercise that free will, we are nothing more than an animal. And when we are trying to control other people's free will, again, we are not in line with the universal flow of energy. So exercise it and give it to others. When we interact with others, let's do what Bhagwanji has done with us through Gita. One, not give advice when it has not been sought in the right manner. Bhagwanji did not start speaking until Arjun came into the right form of studentship and asked Bhagwanji to guide. Very important. So let's not dole out advices to others when it has not been sought from us.
And I'll say in personal experience, it's the toughest to do with your spouse.
Yeah. That's true.
That is one. And secondly, we must allow people to make their choices. We must make it clear to them what the consequences of the choices are going to be. Let them decide. And sometimes when they make wrong choices, allow them to fail. It hurts. It hurts to see other people, when people you love, to fall down, to fail. But sometimes that is the strongest form of love that we have to express, to allow them to fail, to allow them to make their choices and learn from it, and then grow through it and accept them when they make those wrong choices and be there to support them when things go wrong. Right? So let's go to Shlok 40. Agyascha Shraddhanascha
Ajna Shacha Shraddha
Dhanascha
Dhanasya
Sanshayatma Vinashyati
Samshadyatma Vinashyati
Nayam loko asti na paro
Nayam lokusti na paro
na sukham sanshayatmanaha
Na sukham samshayatmaha
manaha.
manaha.
Agyascha is ignorant. Yeah. Ashraddha is a skeptic. Yeah. Ashraddha is convictionless, one who does not have the conviction. And Sanshayatma is the skeptic. Yeah. No. So we have a person who is one who has agyan, ignorant, one who has ashraddha, no reverence or conviction, and Sanshayatma, one who is a skeptic. Vinashyati is ruined. Nayam is there, no, basically there is none. Loko asti na paro, not in this world, na paro, not in the other world, in any other world, not in this material world, not in any other world. Na sukham, will not have sukh, happiness. Sanshayatmanaha, for such a skeptic. Yeah, let's read.
The unperceiving, convictionless, and skeptic, ignorant, gets ruined. For the skeptic, there is no happiness nor any hope in this world or in the hereafter. The misfortune of the skeptic. An unperceiving, ignorant person is incapable of determining what should and what should not be done. Such a man has no understanding of even what is and what is not good for him. He does things which he sees others doing, or else wastes his time in indolence or indulgence. Having no conviction, he follows no discipline, and if ever he thinks of following one, he has no sense of commitment towards it. He has no feeling of reverence for the wise, and if anyone tells him something for his good, he does not welcome it. as he is guided by his ego and an overwhelming suspicious tendency. Such a person has no happiness in the world and no hope in the hereafter.
So, of course, in this shloka, he is describing the type of person who's ignorant. And it's easy for us to look around the world and say, hey, that's what like all of us can visualize this type of a person because we've interacted with many people who would fit that category, right?
We have ourselves
But
been that
interesting,
person before we
but
came.
the purpose of the shloka is to us to become aware that this person resides within us as well. There are many aspects of our own lives that we do things just because other people are doing it. And that could be basically us wasting time because I have to go for a party and I have to drink and I have to do all of that. So I'll miss my swadhyay or I'll reschedule my meeting in the morning. So you'll prioritize basically worldly pleasures over your actual duty, right? This all is, and the way to read and understand this is to have a reflection on ourselves, right? Having no conviction, he follows no discipline. You join the class and they're like, Arey, today I slept at 12 o'clock, I slept at 3 o'clock. I'm not going to wake up for Sunday class. It's too early, yeah. And then you easily like skip it, right? That's the conviction and the commitment, because we read in the previous shloka, right, that the person who will achieve self-realization is the person who's constancy, right? And if you have to swim deep down in a lake to get a gem, you have to be consistent about keep going down. You can't just swim at the surface level really hard and think you're making a lot of progress, right? You have to go deep. And that only happens when we train our own minds to focus on what is important, that is taking us deeper, right? Doing it when we feel like, because it feels good to do it, okay, but you're not going to get far. Right?
Most of our progress comes when we go against our likes, dislikes, and when we go beyond our innate nature. It's easy to go with innate nature, right? If our innate nature tells us to do certain things, we do it. It's very easy process. It's difficult to go against it, to notice what we are doing and how to control that. It's all part of control. It's all part of tap. It's all part of our austerity.
So the other thing that I wanted to highlight here, and this is very common, I experience this a lot, is he has no feeling or reverence for the wise. And if anyone tells him something for his good, he does not welcome it, as he is guided by ego and overwhelming suspicious tendency. I have experienced this personally when when I was younger, and people would talk about saints, and there was this entire rise of these saints, godmen, who were also conmen, all of that. And everyone got painted with that same brush. Ye log sab aise hi hain. They get into the business because they make thousands of crores. I have nothing to learn from them. All of those thoughts stem from my own ego. What was interesting for my growth, though, was when I read the Gita, I realized every person and every interaction is happening from my uddhar, my own benefit. I am not here to judge whether Satguru is actually a realized saint or not. But if he has said something which actually made sense in line with the principles, then for that 5 minutes, he was the wise. Divinity spoke through him, just like when Kumar says something, who's our facilitator, Divinity speaks through him and I catch it. And that's all what I have to do. I don't have to judge the other person. I have to only take what is relevant for me and my own learning, right?
Because Guru Tattva is everywhere. Right?
Because Guru Tattva and Bhagwanji is everywhere, and he's speaking to you from many different forms. When we come into this judgmental mode, oh, this person is not perfect, how can I listen to him? we're operating purely out of ego, not out of divinity. We're judging instead of receiving what we have to receive from Bhagwanji and the universe. Yeah. So just be mindful about how we come across and judge others, because then we are missing out our own learning in the process.
Just wanted to add one point. There is a Tirukkural, it says, Eppurul yararvai kepanum atpurul meipurul kanbadari, means whatever you hear from whoever it is, you understand the core meaning of it instead of attaching to the person, which means you don't take it as a person, you take it as a meaning out of it. So that like you don't attach and not being judgmental. So that's the way I see that, right? Like it is not about the person, it's about the situation. What it is coming, where it is coming from, put it on the situation instead of attaching to the person. Most of us does like attach the person. Okay, he is a good person, he is a bad person, and so on. And that's not consistent ever, right? Like people take choices based on their own situations around them for whatever reasons. It can be emotional, it can be various reasons to this thing. So if we try to do that way about the situation, not about the people, you will become less and less judgmental. Is kind of the path that I have gone through.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And if I connect that back to some of these so-called realized saints who've fallen off their pedestal, obviously, there is an entire chapter, I think chapter 10 or 12, Vibhuti Yoga, 12, 10. I think chapter 10, which is Vibhuti Yoga, where we're all born with our innate nature and little gifts, which are called like qualities, known as Vibhutis, that Bhagwanji has given all of us. And when you read the Gita and you start understanding and appreciating it, yes, you take what is relevant for you, but you also build a lot of reverence that this person had been gifted this Vibhuti, but how the sansar and their lifetime being shiny objects around them, they were able to fall off that pedestal. And then whatever they have to go through, they have to go through. That's now their consequences of their actions. We have to use our own intelligence, what we take and not take for it. But whenever it's something relevant for our own principles, then yeah. Anyways, Vijay, would like to continue reading the connection?
In the conclusion, Lord condenses his teaching in the following two slokas.
Yoga Sanyasta Karmanam
Yoga Sanyasta Karmanam
Jnana Sanchinna Sanshayam
Jnana Samchinna Samshayam
Atmavantam na Karmani
Atmavantam na Karmani
Nibaddhanti Dhananjaya.
Nibadhanti Dhananjaya. Oh, Dhananjaya.
Yeah, I'll just give the meanings.
Sure. Yeah.
So, Yoga Sanyasta Karmanam. So, this basically is annihilate. This basically means when you are dedicating all the actions and the outcome of all the actions through the yoga. Jnana Samchinna Sanshayam. So using the gyan, the knowledge, to chinna, to break, to destroy, to annihilate. Sanshayam, all skepticism. Yeah. Atmavantam na karmani. Atmavantam is by having a discipline over yourself, by having a control over your antakaran. Na karmani, no actions or the results of actions. Nibaddhanti, nibaddhanti is to control or bandha, to create bondage. Okay? Dhananjaya is Arjun.
Oh, Dhananjaya, dedicating to the Lord the outcome of all actions through yoga, annihilating all skepticism by perception of reality and disciplining oneself perfectly. One transcends the outcome of one's action. achieving liberation in normal life. In this shloka, the Lord lays down 3 regulations which can enable a person to achieve liberation while leading a normal life.
So, as mentioned earlier, this is a great summary of the entire chapter. So it'll seem like it's slightly repetitive, but he's basically making it really clear in the next 2 shlokas who we are, what is our role, and what is our true focus. What do we really need to focus on? So yeah.
Dedicating the outcome of actions. While performing normal duties of life, one should not be guided by hope of deriving pleasure from their outcome, but should dedicate their outcome to the Lord. The Lord should be remembered while embarking on an action, and also it is its conclusion. Whatever the outcome, it should be mentally offered to the Lord with a sense of gratitude. All sense of ego should be given up during performance of any action.
So again, this is a power-packed paragraph, and I think we've discussed a lot of these concepts, right? If you start from the reverse, which is action has to happen. As long as we have a body, there will be action. Give up all sense of ego that I am doing the action. No, the action is happening through me. Bhagwanji is making me do it, and I am his instrument. Right? Go slightly higher. By remembering Bhagwanji at all times, you are connecting all your duties and actions to purpose. So you're giving up ego and saying likes, dislikes. You're saying, I'm an instrument of Bhagwanji. What is the purpose of this action? Does it brighten my divinity or does it darken it? Right? And if we go slightly higher, you're doing the action for his pleasure and for everyone's benefit. Lok Sangra as a concept we've again talked about a few times, right? You're doing it not for your self-benefit, you're doing it for everyone's benefit. So you're not taking care of your son with the intent that he will come and take care of you in old age. You're doing it so that he can walk his own destiny and achieve his own self-realization, whatever he has to face. And I say he because I have a son, but of course, he, she is interchangeable here, right? And all of this happens in your normal day-to-day life duties, every single aspect of what we do. So your spiritual life and your work life are not separate. They should be one and the same. But just like we sharpen a pencil to make it write clearer, better, and make it more efficient for you to write, similarly, we do sadhana practice to sharpen our pencil so we can do our duty the correct way. So that we do our duty in a way that we don't create more bondage. We, in fact, use it to achieve liberation. So that's why we do spirituality. It is not for something, it's not a prayer that we do for 1 hour and then leave it. It is something we bring into our daily actions and life, mindfulness into every aspect that we do. Yeah, let's continue.
Annihilating all skepticism, there should be an unflinching determination to utilize life for achieving liberation from the cycle of births and deaths, along with a firm conviction in efficacy of yoga discipline for achieving this end. This discriminant would put an end to all skepticism.
Yeah,
Disciplining oneself. The mind should be completely rid of expectations of deriving pleasure from any worldly enjoyments. A mind so purified gets easily absorbed in thoughts of divine, and then discipline comes easily in life. In this manner, practice of karma yoga is perfected while performing all duties of daily life, giving up sinful and forbidden actions. The Lord gives an assurance in this sloga that correct utilization of life in this manner frees a person from a bondage of actions and it leads to the liberation from the cycle of birth and death.
So yes, so point number 2, right? This is the toughest for us. At least for me, it's been the toughest, right? We've spent most of our formative years, growing up years, developing and being around sansar, where we want proof for everything. We operate on logic. We operate on, but can you prove it, right? If you can't prove it, then I won't believe it. But the entire Gita, and we've discussed this principle earlier also, is based on mano fir jano, which means you have to believe before you know. It is not the other way around. You have believe that you get a good education, you will be better off in life. You believe that you read more books, the book that you read will make you smarter, right? So the entire principle of mano ya jano is the mano fir jano is the foundation of you starting to experience miracles. And that is, it's honestly for me, that's been one of the tougher things to do.
Even though that's all that we've done for all our life, even from a scientific point of view. Like if you think about all the scientific discoveries, it's not like you've actually gone and experienced them yourself. You take that knowledge to be true based on somebody else having done some experiments and coming and telling you. So you believe them. You don't know those things. You've never seen an atom. You believe that there is an atom because of somebody else telling you so, right? So then it's the same concept here. There are lots of realized saints out there that have experienced this. We haven't, but then we believe that if we walk the path they have walked, we do the experiment that they have done in the right controlled fashion, just like any other experiment, then we will also achieve the same results that they achieved, isn't it? So it's not very different from what we've done all our lives anyway.
So the first step is mano fir jano. So first you have to believe, then you start experiencing. After you start experiencing, you start yearning to experience Bhagwanji and get out of this liberation of life and death. That's when your sadhana, your practice will go to the complete next level. Right now you're doing it because it feels good. It's the right thing to do. I want to be a better version of myself. And all of these are fantastic reasons to start the journey. But as you continue on the journey, there will come a breaking point where you start realizing, no, this is the real truth. And I have 30, 40, 50, 20, I don't know how many years, but in this years left, I have an opportunity to get out of the cycle. Am I using it or am I not using it? And that's when you annihilate all skepticism. That's when you use your intellect as a business-minded intellect focused towards self-realization. I am totally focused that this is what I want to do next, right? And we're all walking towards that path in our own, we are at different ways towards that goal, to be honest. And everyone's moving at a different pace, but I can be rest assured, as long as you guys continue practice, we're all moving forward to reaching this point of annihilating skepticism and then going to that next level. Yeah, I think we've already talked a lot about the mind. I think when I started off the class with it. Anything else you'd like to add? Bhaskar, would you like to read the connection, please?
Thus, giving the essence of Karma Yoga, the Lord exhorts Arjuna to get ready for war.
Tasmad jnana sambhutam.
Tasmadachyana sambodham.
Hritastham jnana sinatmanaha.
Kritustam jnana sinatmanah
Chitvainam sanshayam yogam.
chit vainam samsayoham
Atishto uttishta bharata.
matishto ishtita bharadaha.
So the ma is in the previous word yogam, and then we start with atishtothishta bharata.
Oh, Bharata, thus cutting the asunder with the sword of...
I'll just give the word meanings.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Tasmat is that's why. That's why. Agyan sambhutam. So this is not gyan, it's agyan. Agyan sambhutam is sambhut is born of agyan, ignorance. Hritastham is that is dwelling in your hridaya, in your heart. Jnana sina, that is basically is for, sorry, Jnana sinatmanaha. Atmanaha is yours, and Jnana sina is sword of Gyan, sword of reality, realization, sword of perception. Chit Vainam. Ainam is this. Chitva is cut through. Sanshayam is skepticism. Yogam is yoga. Atishto is be firmly established in yoga. Be firmly established. Atishto. And uttishta is stand up. Uttishta is stand up. So stand up for what? Stand up for war. Bharat is Arjun. Let's go ahead.
Okay. O Bharata, thus cutting asunder with the sword of perception, the skepticism born of ignorance about self-dwelling in your heart. Get firmly established in yoga and stand up for war.
So it's a very, I find this shloka explanation very visual, right? Sword of perception about the self dwelling in your heart. So which means perception out here is what? Knowledge about capital S self. That is what we're doing by reading and sharpening our own thinking, right? The more you have gyan, the sharper your sword will be to cut all ties of ignorance, right? And the more you cut ties, the stronger you will be in yoga. Yoga means connect with Bhagwanji. And then even an act of war becomes a divine act. The most gruesome act in this world can become a divine act. As long as you have that sword of perception and you operate with connection with Bhagwanji. And so this shloka, in my mind, plays out really well at this stage.
Annihilation of all skepticism by perception. In the beginning of this chapter, the Lord had told Arjuna that the tradition of Karma Yoga had been kept alive by Rajashris, or the warrior king saints. These king saints used to perform all their duties devotedly. The special feature of Karma Yoga is that if a man has a firm conviction in Karma Yoga while engaged in even the fierce business of war, he transcends the bondage of actions forever. In this shloka, the Lord says that all the skepticism, doubts, and fickleness which arise in the mind are born of ignorance of the self. This ignorance and skepticism can be annihilated only by the sword of self-perception. As soon as this is achieved, then performing all the activities of the battle of life, a person is freed from bondage of those activities.
Yeah, so I think this is self-explanatory. We've covered this a few times, or does anybody have any questions on this? Okay, the next paragraph is...
Abhinav,
Yeah.
what is self-perception here?
So it's basically knowledge about the capital S self. So self-perception is interchangeably used as true perception. And out here, imagine this: if you realize your own
True self, your
true
own
identity,
True identity, Swarup.
which is you realize that you are a soul and not this body, and you operate from there, then that, when you're fully engaged with it, is true perception. It's the knowledge that comes with self-realization. And when you have that knowledge, the whole world and the way you look at it changes completely. And that's what we've been discussing. No, thank you for asking that question. I'm glad you did. Because sometimes, I mean, even when I first read it, so many of these terms you understand, but then you don't really understand. So
Yeah.
I fully appreciate the question. Did that
Thank
make
you.
sense?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, continue.
There is another significant feature of this chapter. The Lord has declared that he incarnates himself to impel people in righteous conduct for their welfare whenever he finds that their disposition is wavering from the righteousness. This is great assurance, as it makes it abundantly clear that the Lord provides help in righteous conduct by his own power.
So this is very interesting. So yesterday, incidentally or coincidentally, I should say, yes, that's the one I was looking for yesterday, actually. Yesterday in our Saturday class, we literally had just a 2-hour conversation about the difference between Sankhya Yoga and Karma Yoga. And people were trying to understand the difference. And this actually makes it so clear. Why are Sankhya yogis born? Why do saints come back? If saints are already self-realized, why do they come back? Right? If they have nothing to achieve in this world, why are they here? Right? We are here because we have past prarabdha. We have past consequences that we have to pay for. So we have to face them. We have to use our karma yogi principles, cut that prarabdha, so we go back to our natural state and natural source. But why do Sankhya yogis who are already self-realized, why do they come in this world? And as Tuina just took out, chapter 4.7, in the 7th shloka, he very clearly states that I come whenever there is a lack of dharma in the world. So whenever humanity loses its focus, I manifest myself.
Shlok 7 and Shlok 8. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyuthanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham. And the very next one. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya ch dushkritam dharma sansthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. I manifest myself in every yug, and yug here is every moment. Every time that there is hani, there is destruction of dharma, and there is an increase in adharma. And so at that time, to protect the good people, the sadhus, and to destroy the sinners, the evil, and to establish the dharma again, I am born, I incarnate myself. And this has to be taken as with everything, what is inside is outside. So the macro example that Abhinav gave, that there are all these saints who take form, who incarnate to guide us, to show us what is the right way of living life, to help us establish dharma. Similarly, inside of us, every moment, God incarnates himself. And how does he incarnate himself inside of us every moment? This is not in yug, in like hundreds and thousands of years. No, we're talking of every moment, moment to moment. If there is, unrighteousness that takes hold in our heart, in our mind, Lord promises that he will come, he will incarnate himself inside of us. And how does he do that? Through our gut, through our conscience. He lives inside of us and he speaks to us through our conscience. And our conscience will tell us if we are doing something right or something wrong. I'll give an example of how, in Gita, when we start reading it, we realize that there are lots of, at the surface of it all, there are lots of seemingly opposing conversations being created, right? On one hand, you say A, on the other hand, you say B, right? For example, on one hand, you say that, Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, the entire world is my family. On the other side, you say that, and that we should not have attachment to our family. On the other side, you say, I have my first duties towards my family, towards, how do you reconcile these seemingly opposite messages? And the entire Gita is splattered with those kind of messages, right? Now, how do we reconcile those? Then as we start going on this journey and we actually start putting these principles in practice, we will start, asking ourselves questions. Oh, I did this, it didn't work out, right? And we will also find ourselves going from one extreme to another, right? The pendulum is going to swing on from one end to another until we find the right balance in different situations. And we'll start, our intellect will start to get finer, more subtle, so that we can start to see, in this situation, this principle needs to be applied. In the other situation, a slightly more opposite situation needs to be applied. So to give an example, I was trying to increase the quantity of my sadhana. So, and that's something that you're always encouraged to do. So, and I felt like I'm not, like I was beginning to feel like I'm stagnating somewhere in my sadhana. The amount, the quantity, the number of hours or whatever time I'm spending on this is somehow not increasing. And it feels like, I need to take my next step, right? So in that enthusiasm, I took too many steps at the same time. And the number of hours I started spending on the sadhana was beginning to go quite high. And I started to get like feelers from my environment that, something's not right. Like, I'm doing that at the expense of some other duties that I have. In certain cases, it was in the form of Abhinav, it was in the form of my child, sometimes it was in the form of my work. And I was beginning to feel uncomfortable, but I was not quite sure what am I doing right or wrong. Like I was like, oh, but this is something that I'm supposed to do, because if I'm not doing it, then I'm not doing this right. I had that struggle for about a month and a half, and I wasn't quite sure what to do until I started to listen into my gut. And I was like, no, I'm not doing my duty towards my work. If my work is my God, right? I need to get God back into this work. And somehow I'm like, that balance was going off. So my internal self was telling me, I was feeling discomfort about work and everything. I was feeling a little bit of that, that anxiety that comes in. And I began to listen into my anxiety. And I said, this anxiety is God telling me something is not quite right. Listen to it. Go back to, what you need to do. So I pulled back a little bit from the quantity of my sadhana, and I started to increase the quality of my sadhana to make sure that whatever I'm reading, I'm becoming way more conscious of it and way more conscious of applying it in my work on a day-to-day basis. And I realized when I started using that conscience that's telling me that level of anxiety that tells me, and I'm trying to hone that for myself, that tells me when I'm going off the balance this way or the other. And I'm still in that process. I'm still learning. I still keep going, sometimes I kilter on one side, sometimes I kilter on the other side, and I have to keep finding my balance. Like, now I'm getting too rajoguni, too much in this thing. I have to, get myself back in here. But that is Bhagwanji being born inside of me every moment when I'm going off the balanced path to tell me that this is the right way, this is the right way. And now I'm listening in there rather than go to Kumar to seek help, or go to Abhinav, I need help, I want to talk, you know. Now I'm like, no, I don't need anyone else to guide me any longer. I just need to listen in. I just need to listen in and act on that and learn from it. This inner voice will guide me no matter what. Now I'm beginning to have very firm conviction on it, because for last few months that I've practiced it and honed it, it's really helping me. And I'm beginning to develop more and more confidence that this inner voice will guide me. What am I doing right or wrong, or what I should do, how much swadhyaya I need to do, how much work I need to do, at what point do I need to pull back from work and say it's enough. Now I need to, you know, that, because it's always that sense of duty. I have duty towards my employees, I have a duty towards my company, I have duty towards my child. Where do I, you know, it's like there are always these right choices, and then you don't know where to balance. That's when this inner voice will come in. Bhagwanji is promising us that he is being born. We just need to connect back to him and connect to his incarnation inside of us to listen it.
Tulina, then what is it that blocks your inner thoughts? Sometimes you are really working hard to, you know, listen to the inner voice, but कई बारी बहुत समझ नहीं आ पाता है कि I sometimes just want to, you know, pick up कि क्या होता है कि आप अपनी आवाज को नहीं सुन पाते हो.
So we.
Did I do this? I'm amazed of why so for some reason, just literally like a couple of minutes before I came into this class, I ran back to the Adhyaya room and I got a book, and I took out a page and I said, for some reason, towards the end of the class, I'm going to read this to the class today. And I see why, because you've just asked the question, which is the answer that I've opened this page, and I haven't opened it now. This was like lying open.
Half the people won't understand Hindi.
I won't say it in Hindi. I will just explain the answer in English. This is literally exactly what she's asked. So there is a book written by D.M. Sinhaji, the Nanaji, who has also written Bhagavad Gita. It's called Anand Yatra. And it basically is Gita in question answer format. So the particular chapter that I had opened up talks about why does our mind is so flickering, and why are we not, when we know what is the right thing to do, why are we not always able to stick to it, right? Why do we sometimes make choices that we know afterwards are suboptimal in nature, right?
Excellent. I have the English version.
Yeah, so this is chapter 2, the like Adhyaya 2, chapter 1 type of stuff. I can explain it in English, but if you can find out,
I'll
okay?
find it. Just one second.
So there's an entire chapter which talks about how do you control our mind that is constantly flittering from one topic to another. And the starting point is like this, right? That
Is this the thing? Where do we have to go?
second topics related to discipline.
Controlling the restless mind.
Yes, controlling the restless mind. So I'll just read this out. I think it's very, very well written. So I think it will answer.
You know what?
It has just asked
I can
us.
also just send a quick picture to the group. Yeah.
Yes. Can
So
I
you can-
read it?
Yeah. Just one second.
So in the struggle of life, people often face the difficulty of how the mind can be kept in control. So why am I talking about mind here to answer this question? Is because for us to listen to that deep voice, it is very important. Like it's like looking deep into the water. If there are ripples on the water, we cannot see the bottom, even if it is absolutely clear water. But if the water is clear and there are no ripples, we are able to see through very clearly. So when mind is agitated, we are not able to listen to our inner voice. So for us to listen to our inner voice, it's very important for us to calm our mind down, calm that agitation down. So the most important question then becomes, why does my mind become so agitated? And how do I stop it from being agitated so that I can listen to that inner voice to guide me? Okay.
So there is also an entire chapter in the Gita, which is chapter 6, that focuses purely on meditation.
Yes.
And how to do meditation correctly. And the reason that is there in chapter 6 is exactly why, Rita, you've asked that question, is after knowing all the Karma Yogi and the last chapter of Karma Yogi is, your mind is going to be active and it'll be tough to find your inner voice. Let's talk about meditation, because now you're asking the right questions. Please continue.
I won't read the whole thing, but I'll read the major parts of this to, get our answers here. So this is how it says, okay? In the struggle of life, people often face the difficulty of how the mind can be kept in control. No matter what the activity, be it studying, office work, rearing of children, or household management. Instead of focusing on the task at hand, the mind keeps straying towards irrelevant matters for some reason or the other while performing that act. While studying, the concentration of the students gets disturbed by memories of TV serials, or it is plagued by anxiety about their unpreparedness for the upcoming examinations. If there has been an altercation between the wife and mother-in-law in the morning, the husband repeatedly worries about it, even during his work time in the office.
He knows me also.
Back home, the mother and daughter-in-law attend to their work, but they too remain tense on recalling the unpleasant exchanges in the morning. Similarly, while preparing for an important assignment, the mind of a worker or an executive strays repeatedly to concerns like, will my efforts be successful? Will everyone approve of what has been prepared by me? How do I finish so much work in such little time? What if someone upstages me behind my back? If I lose my job, how will I support myself and my family? And so on. Obviously, no work can be performed satisfactorily with such a restless mind. Lack of interest in the performance of duties, disappointments at the work not being executed to satisfaction, or continued feelings of restlessness and anxiety in the mind. These are the factors that lead to exhaustion and disinterest while working. If tension and disorder persist, they start taking a toll on the physical and mental health of the person. So all of these things happen because of an agitated mind, where we are constantly thinking of these kind of things that we've just heard. For neutralizing multiple such problems of life, it is necessary that we repose unshakable faith on that extreme entity who is omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient, and the paramount benefactor of all beings. Surely, one must repose one's trust in the power that has been gifted to us, which has gifted us with this body, the pran, and the life. This thought is the basis of unswerving faith and rightful utilization of these three gifts. What are these three gifts? The body, the life, and the pran. Pran, which is the life activating force. If these three are utilized properly, circumstances do not acquire the form of difficulties. So any circumstance that we face, it is not a difficulty that we face. The human being must ponder on his predicament. Has he been flung by destiny on a thorny bed of nettles, only to be tossed about by ferocious winds of the world, which he is expected to weather all by himself? If we reflect a little, then we will soon be able to conclude that in respect of the physical self, we are much the same as creatures like animals and birds that exhaust their life in the flurry of catering day to day to the needs of their bodies. But as distinct from them, man has been facilitated with a distinguishing feature called the intellect, which has the corpus of power to think, with the help of which we will be able to master every other discipline. Okay. So then the question becomes, okay, we understand all of this. Then what is the root cause of the restlessness of mind?
I think
Okay.
they can read it on their own.
Okay, so
We're running out of time.
we're running out of time. Okay, just give me 2 minutes just to answer this one little thing. Okay, I'll just take 1 minute, I promise. Sorry.
We have birthday greetings and first chapter.
Okay. So the root cause of the restlessness of the mind, it says, is on analyzing, it can be discerned that the propensity to seek worldly pleasures and escape all discomforts are the chief instigators of restlessness of mind. So when we are feeling restless, agitated, we have to ask ourselves, what is causing this restlessness to me? One, either we are seeking out a worldly pleasure, or we are trying to escape from some pain. These are the two things. I seek pleasure, I want to avoid pain. Which of these am I looking at, and how do I handle this? And it is important for us to be able to go back, like seeing that we have experienced these things a lot in the past, right? We have seen fleeting, the moments of happiness and unhappiness have come and gone. But we are a Nitya Satta. We are a immortal being, which is apart from all of this. I have been a witness to all these innumerable events in the past, and I will continue to witness them. They will come and go.
Yes, Bhageshri.
Yeah, I wanted to ask that we read in the previous shloka and in our earlier chapters as well, that we want to get liberated from the cycle of births and deaths, right? So why isn't it good to be born and live a life? Why do we want to get liberated?
So
the
living-
thing is this.
yeah.
So why do you want to get liberated? The question is, it's like, as long as you are born in this world, you are going to experience suffering. You're going to.
But then there's joy also.
Yes. So you're
And that-
constantly in the duality. You're constantly in the duality of joy and suffering. Joy, suffering, pain. Joy, suffering, pain. Everything becomes transient. So, and as long as we have a body, we realize that everything we are doing in this world is temporary. Everything is temporary.
Can I take this?
Yeah.
Okay. So there is no the liberation from the cycle of birth and death is not a liberation from being born in this world at all. It's a liberation from suffering. Okay. It's a liberation from body consciousness, not a liberation from body. Nobody is saying don't be born. In fact, the most highest realized of the saints want to be born again and again as a servant of God.
Which is what we just read in the.
So we are not asking for liberation from body or this world. We are asking liberation from suffering.
From attachment to this.
We are asking liberation from suffering. What we experience in this world, small amount of joy, so much of suffering. Because joy is fleeting. It is momentary. That happiness that comes from external sources is very momentary. It comes in that moment and then it goes. There is a lot of suffering getting to that moment of happiness, for all the toil, effort, worry, anxiety that has led us to that moment. And right after that, then there is a lot of anxiety and suffering that, oh my God, this is going to go away from me. How do I keep it going? And that thing will go because it is temporary. There is nothing that will be permanent in this material world. So as soon as you get that happiness, you are guaranteed that there will be suffering in its wake. So we are seeking liberation from that continuous cycle of happiness, momentary happiness, and all the suffering that comes with it. Not from this body. We want to continue to live, but live in a state of continuous happiness. Not that moment that you experience of happiness. If that can become your life, you are in a state of bliss, in a state of happiness, and in a state of enthusiasm, and live this life that you are living. There is no change in the physical life that you will live. You will continue to live this life. You will continue to do the work that you have to do. You will continue to have all your relatives. You will continue to discharge your duties. But in a state of continuous happiness, in a state of bliss. If you think that liberation would cause, a leaving of this body or leaving of the sansaric relationships that we have, there's nothing further from the truth. Because we are not sannyasis. We are not born to be sannyasis. We are not meant to give up renunciation. In fact, the very next chapter that we will start in our next class will talk about what is true renunciation. What are we really, really, truly supposed to give up? We will all become sannyasis. We have to, but not at a later stage at 70 or 80. We're supposed to become sannyasis now. But But what are we supposed to take sannyas from? What are we supposed to renounce? Today, we will learn that. And why? Because we are trying to remain in that state of continuous state of happiness, continuous state of ultimate bliss, anand. That is, when we reach that, no, there is no abhav in us. There is no lack inside of us. We are not constantly trying to go outside to fill that hole inside of me. As long as there is a hole inside me and I feel incomplete, I'm constantly trying to complete myself through the relationships, through my material acquisitions. Through everything that we do, we are trying to complete ourselves. That process of completion, Gita tells us, will not happen through external relationships, will not happen through material acquisitions. It's an inward journey. That liberation from sense of lack is self-perception, is the freedom from birth and death. When we say in our invocation shlokas, asato ma sadgamaya, tamso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityor ma amritam gamaya. Free me from mrityu, from immortality, and take me to, free me from mortality and take me towards immortality. It doesn't mean that your body will become immortal. No, your body will still be mortal. But you as a soul will move from mortality, because you now know in that moment of realization, you know you are not this body, you are a soul. You will connect to that soul. So if some disease happens to this body, you're not attached to it. Your body will go through what it has to go through. You will not suffer because of the pain your body has to go through. So liberation is from this cycle of suffering. And after you have reached that, you will again come back. In fact, the highest forms of service is that I want to come back. I know there is going to be pain to my body when I come back in this world. I know there is going to be pain when I have these relationships. I know there is a scare that I might fall again. But I want to come back as a service to you, Lord.
Long story short, Bhagyashree, you are in Siddhartha mode and Tuhina is in Buddha mode. That's the difference. If you are really happy, be like that. I'm really happy for you. So if you haven't seen anything of that sort in life, stay blessed.
Thank you, Vijay. Thank you, Tuhina Abhinav, for such a beautiful explanation. Thank you.
Okay, let's continue reading, and then we have a birthday greeting as well.
Oh, we've not finished reading?
No.
Sorry.
Yes, oh, sorry, Kavita, I didn't see the hand. Please.
Hi, very well explained. And, I have a doubt when you are talking about the agitation of mind. It's such a beautiful point because in yoga therapy also we say the diseases which is manifesting in body, the mind is the root cause. So it is very, very important to calm the mind so that whatever psychosomatic diseases won't appear in the body. So you were saying the 2 points, right? For that reason. Can you please repeat it again, Tuhina?
Yeah. One is either we are trying to seek a pleasure or we are trying to avoid some pain. Rag, dvesh, likes and dislikes are the root cause of the restlessness of mind. Likes, whatever we like, we want to have more of that. So we are seeking out certain pleasures. Dislike, when we are trying to avoid what we don't like. So we are trying to avoid some kind of pain. That pain could be pain of embarrassment, it could be pain of hard work, it could be pain of whatever, it can be pain of some difficult conversations we need to create sometimes in the line of duty, right? So likes and dislikes cause the agitation of the mind.
Thank you.
Yes, Bhaskar, please continue.
Okay. The Lord then embarked on a description of various types of yagnas and stressed the necessity of performing yagnas. With the physical equipment of the body, everyone has to perform some action or other all the time. By performing those actions in the form of yagnas, a person gets nectar of their resultant outcome. This nectar is the perception of the self, which removes all the doubts about the self. With firm conviction and without any trace of skepticism or ignorance, the performance of duties as karma yoga leaves no scope whatever for any laxity of the mind. This is the path to man's ultimate salvation. Thus, in the Upanishad.
No, no.
Oh,
Tuina will read that from the other book.
okay.
So we'll do that. If there are any questions, we can take that and then we'll close the chapter. So we'll close the chapter. This is actually the English version of it, but we typically do this in the Hindi format.
Hindi or
So Sanskrit, yeah.
Sanskrit?
So I'll just close the chapter like this. Om Tat Siddhi
Srimad Bhagavad
Gitasu Upanishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Shri Krishna Arjun Samvade Jnana Karma Sannyas Yogo Nam Chaturadhyayah. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hari Om Tat Sat. Start chapter 5 in the next class.
Yeah. Then if we have 2 minutes, I'll tell a story. If you
Uh,
guys are okay.
No, no.
We
Our
can
birthday wishes, is there anything?
We have a birthday wish, and then
Then
we'll
we'll.
definitely
come
stay
to
on
the
for the
story.
story.
Yeah.
So it is.
Abhinav, are we going to do the concluding shlokas first and then the birthday thing, or what is that?
You're the man. Okay. K.
Thanks for the reminder.
Thanks for the reminder.
Okay, yeah, I'll finish it.
Okay, so
Ask
what?
if she's okay. You're
I
coming,
think I'm okay. Yeah, I'm okay to do that.
and we'll close it with the 3 ohms in the end.
Okay. Om Sarvesham Swastir Bhavadu Sarvesham Shantir Bhavadu Sarvesham Purnam Bhavadu Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavadu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramayah Sarve Satpatrami Pashyantu Ma Kaschit Dugabhag Bhave. Om Asatoma Satgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Avishishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Om. Om.
Okay, thank you so much. That was fantastically done.